On Easter Sunday, April 12, 1925, Anne H. Leone entered the world to an Italian immigrant family in the Bronx borough of New York City. In that time, she has been a daughter, wife, mother to my mom and her siblings, grandmother to me, my brother, and cousins, and great-grandmother to my daughter, son, and niece. I spent a great deal of time with her throughout my life, and in many ways she served as my second mom. As we have both gotten older, one of the things that I have found to be particularly great about my relationship with her is learning about my family lineage and history. My grandmother and her part of the family line has connections to much of the history that has happened in the city of New York over the course of the last 100 years. She even had Frank Sinatra early in his career sing at her prom. Like many other Sicilian immigrants, my grandmother's family arrived in America through the immigration station at Ellis Island, seeking a better life in America for themselves and their children. Once here, they set about living and working in New York City. One of the earliest brushes with history that my family living here had was unfortunately one of the city's darkest days. My grandmother's grandfather, while on his way home from work, saw what he thought was laundry being thrown from a factory window. What he did not see until getting closer was that it was young ladies jumping from a fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory. Due to the horrible safety conditions within the building, these girls were left with the horrible choice of jumping to their death or burning in the fire. Resulting in over 140 deaths, this tragedy was the worst workplace disaster in New York City history until September 11, 2001. According to my grandmother, this event haunted her grandfather for the rest of his days. Thankfully, this tragedy put factories on the road to considerable reform to prevent other tragedies like it from ever happening again. In her own lifetime, my grandmother lived through two of the most significant events of the 20th century, the Great Depression and World War II. My grandmother's family, like much of New York City, felt the impact of the Depression in a very real way. My great-grandfather's business suffered at the hands of the poor economy, and my grandmother relates tales of listening to FDR's fireside chats to receive the latest updates of how the country was coping. When she was 16, World War II broke out. She remembers hearing about America's declaration of war against Japan, interrupting her listening to music on the radio. She recalls gathering with the rest of her school in the auditorium the next day to listen to the radio and receive updates about the declaration from President Roosevelt. She often speaks of the next 4 years as being years of sacrifice, years that saw the war impact everyone and everything. In the midst of this mayhem, my grandmother met my grandfather Peter, and after 2 weeks of courtship, they married in July of 1945. Due to the rationing of the war, the few pictures shown here are the only pictures of their wedding. All film went to the war effort. These pictures came from a leftover roll that someone had from before the war. Soon after their wedding, it seemed that my grandfather, who was a part of a B-17 bomber crew, was going to be sent to Japan. However, before this could happen, the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the war was over. From this intense beginning, my grandparents stayed married for nearly 50 years until my grandfather's death in 1993. In that time, she gave birth to and raised 4 children and saw the birth of 5 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. Being a part of this family unit has always filled me with a great amount of pride. I have always felt a deep bond with all of the members of my family, and most especially my grandmother. As I have grown older, gotten married, and have had my children, I have felt this connection only grow stronger. Being connected to history through her experiences and stories affects who I am and what I do almost daily. It has helped me to develop my passion for the history of New York City and all it has seen. For me, knowing the history of this amazing city is knowing the history of my family. If we all took a moment to look back on the history of where we came from and who is a part of our story, we will all find that in some way we have connection to not only those who came before us, but the significant events that occurred in the past and have shaped our present.